بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. So continuing with second principle from the 6 principles, and this was in connection to unity. So after the foundation of Tawheed, following on from that, if every person is worshipping Allah alone and then worshipping Allah through what He legislated. So these are the 2 foundations of the religion. That you worship Allah alone and that you worship Him through what He legislated. So if everybody is adhering to this foundation, then naturally there will be unity. There will be unity in the religion. And so the hearts and the bodies will be, or the hearts will be united. So this is why the second mighty principle after the first principle of Tawheed is the principle of unity. In the previous lesson we looked at numerous texts from the Quran and likewise from the Sunnah, in which there is a command to hold on to the rope of Allah and to not be divided and to not split and to not differ, and that this splitting and differing was from the way of the previous nations like the Jews and the Christians. And this is because they differed, they fell into innovations, they introduced things, and as a result of that they divided their religion and they turned into sects. So we went through the explanation of Sheikh Zayd, the short explanation. Then we moved on to Sheikh Muhammad Aman's explanation. And Sheikh Muhammad Aman mentioned how in the modern era we find there are many groups which have appeared, jama'at, and they refer to themselves as a jama'ah. And we said that we must understand that this difference between the true meaning of the word jama'ah and between this modern use of the word jama'ah. Because the true meaning of the word jama'ah is anyone or a group of people who hold fast to the guidance of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ upon the understanding of the companions, upon the way of the Salaf. And so anyone who is upon this, that person is from the Jama'ah, even if they are just one person, or even if they are separated by, in different lands. Right? So a person of the Sunnah in the UK and a person of the Sunnah in Europe and a person of the Sunnah in America and a person of the Sunnah in Saudi Arabia or anywhere else, they are all one Jama'ah. So what unites them is these foundations, the foundations of belief, of Tawheed, of creed, and so on and so forth. This is the correct meaning of the word Jama'ah. However, as the Sheikh explained, in the 20th century many of these political groups appeared, and their aims are purely political, and what they do to mislead the people is that they say that you have to be part of a jama'ah, and what they really mean is their group, and they want allegiance, they want obedience, and they mislead the people that unless you are part of a jama'ah or our jama'ah, then you're not really working for Islam. And what they really mean is they want to compete with the rulers for power. They want to replace the rulers, and these are just the means that they are using. And then they do all of this in the name of da'wah. They claim that they are calling to Allah, but really this is not calling to Allah. This is basically seeking power for themselves and competing with the rulers for power. So the Sheikh discussed these issues and said that these innovated, politicized groups, this is what they do. They confuse and deceive the people by way of these false labels, by way of this label of jama'ah, and we need to be very careful and to make this important distinction. So continuing with our lesson, we're going to continue from where we left off. So the author, Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned in the same principle, وَذَكَرَ أَنَّهُ أَمَرَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ بِالْإِجْتِمَاعِ فِي الدِّينِ وَنَهَاهُمْ عَنِ التَّفَرُّقِ فِيهِ ويزيده وضوحا ما وردت به السنة من العجب العجاب في ذلك. So the author said that Allah mentioned, meaning in his book, that he ordered the Muslims to be united in the religion, and he prohibited them from splitting therein. And what increases this in further clarity is what has been related in the Sunnah of amazing affairs related to this. So in other words, the Quran has clearly commanded with unity and has prohibited splitting and differing. And then the Sunnah has come and made this affair even more clear and even more apparent. So there are many statements of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ in which he mentions about the affair of this nation, its splitting, and the causes for splitting. And so one of those texts, the Shaykh mentions just one of those texts, in which the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, he said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَرْضَى لَكُمْ ثَلَاثًا أَن تَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا وأن تعتصموا بحبل الله جميعا ولا تفرقوا وأن تناصحوا لولاة الأمر. So in this hadith, which is related by Imam Ahmed and others, and it's authentic, the Messenger of Allah, he said, indeed Allah is pleased with three things for you: that you worship Allah alone without associating any partners with him, and that you hold fast to the rope of Allah, all of you together, and do not split, and that you advise those who are in authority. If you pay attention, you will notice how, in fact, the first three principles, the first three foundations in this book are actually contained in this hadith. Because the first three mighty foundations of the religion is to worship Allah alone, then to be united in the religion, and then to be united behind a ruler. Right? So it's first of all establishing Tawheed and the correct belief, then to have the hearts to be united, which is unity in the religion, which means holding on to sound, authentic guidance, and thirdly, to also be united in the physical sense as well. And this can only take place when there is a ruler, and that ruler is obeyed in whatever is good and whatever is obedience to Allah Azza wa Jal. And so this hadith, look at how in the hadith the Messenger of Allah he said, indeed Allah is pleased with three things for you: that you worship him alone, and that you do not associate any partners with him, and that you hold fast to the rope of Allah, all of you together, without splitting, and that you advise the ones in authority. So this hadith, clearly you can see it supports and aids the verses that we read previously, that we looked at previously, and clearly you can see it enjoins unity and prohibits splitting and differing. Then the author went on to say, after mentioning this, he then went on to say, ثم صار الأمر إلى أن الافتراق في أصول الدين وفروعه هو العلم والفقه في الدين. So now he's mentioning something which happened in history. He said, so in essence he's saying that despite this being so clear in the Quran and the Sunnah, this issue of unity and being one and together and not splitting, he said the situation turned in such a way that to actually be divided in the foundations of the religion and even in the branches of the religion, this was treated to be actual knowledge, right? An actual fiqh, actual understanding. So in other words, what he's saying, that if this person, his belief is the belief of the Salaf, in Allah's names, in Allah's attributes, in qadar, in iman, regarding the Sahaba, right, in all those issues. And this person, his belief is the belief of the Mu'tazila, who deny Allah's names and attributes, and that person's belief is the belief of the Ash'aris, and so on and so forth, that this differing is actually from the religion. Right? So differing in the usul and the foundations, that this is actual knowledge, this is actual understanding. And as for being united, as we shall see, the situation became such that anyone who called to actual unity, the genuine unity which is commanded in the Book and Sunnah, that person was treated to be a mad person or a heretic, meaning he's trying to achieve what is impossible. And he's just mad for even trying to call to this unity. Why? Because Allah's decreed disunity, Allah's decreed differing, so we have to accept and work together, right? These kind of ideas. So any person who comes along and he calls to the genuine unity with its correct understanding, then this person is considered to be mad and insane and a heretic. And we're going to come to that statement in a short while, inshallah ta'ala. But for now, Sheikh Muhammad Aman, what he does is he explains to us how this situation changed from the time of the Sahaba to the time that we are living in now. And over the next few pages he goes on to just give us some historical details, historical background. So we're going to speak about this for maybe the rest, or a major part of the rest of the lesson, inshallah ta'ala. So the first thing that we should understand is, before we look at the highlights of what the Shaykh has mentioned, is that when we look at the splitting of the Ummah, we can focus on, let's say, 8 different areas. Right? So in the first century, after the passing away of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there are 4 major groups which appeared. And in the second century, there are, and sometime afterwards as well, there are another 4 orientations, 1, 2, 3, or 4 or 5 orientations that we're going to look at, inshallah. Very, very briefly, each one. So the first split which appeared during the time of the Sahaba was the splitting of the Khawarij. And this group of people was prophesied by the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And to put it in a nutshell, these people are people with little understanding of the religion, and they never studied with the Sahaba, and they are displeased with the way the rulers rule and the way they distribute wealth. Right? They are unhappy with the way the rulers distribute wealth, and they are unhappy with the decisions of the rulers. So they have something of hawa, of desire, and then they also have jahl, they have ignorance in the religion, and they are ignorant of these foundations. So what they do is they believe that they are trying to establish justice, and then they oppose the ruler, and eventually they declare the ruler to be a disbeliever, and then they consider it obligatory to remove that ruler so they can establish justice again. And that unless they establish justice, then Islam is non-existent. Islam doesn't exist. This is the general concept or general idea going through the mind of one of these types of people. And these types of people, as the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he severely spoke against them, and he said that they are the dogs of hellfire, that they are young in age and foolish-minded, that if I was to reach them, I would slaughter them like the slaughtering of Ad, and that they speak with the most beautiful speech, yet the Quran does not go beyond their collarbones or their necks. Many statements that the Messenger of Allah said about them. So this group basically appeared. They revolted against Uthman radiallahu anhu and Ali radiallahu anhu, and they declared both of them to be disbelievers. They expelled them from Islam, and they revolted against them, and they actually killed them both as well, eventually. So this basic idea of the Khawarij is something that has continued and remains, and it passed through every generation. And today, groups like Al-Qaeda, groups like ISIS, Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, these types of groups, they all have this actual mentality, and they create chaos and turmoil in the Muslim lands by way of their deviation and misguidance. So in any case, these people, they appeared, and although Ali radiallahu anhu killed most of them, there was 8 or 10 of them that escaped, and then they traveled to various lands, right? Some went to Oman, some went to towards Iraq, some went to different places, and they carried the seeds of the ideology of the Khawarij. So this now made a major split in the Ummah, and they also brought false doctrines, false ideas, false doctrines in relation to takfir, in relation to takfir of the sinful people who fall into sins, in relation to the rulers, how we ought to behave with the rulers. So this was a major split and the appearance of this sect, the Khawarij. The second group, which came out of the same circumstances, are the Rafida. The Rafida or the Shia. And these people, they opposed the Sahaba. They expelled all of the Sahaba from Islam, apart from maybe a handful, maybe 3 or so. And from the initial beginnings, they began to add other doctrines, such as, for example, the Quran is not complete, that something has been left out of the Quran, that the prophethood should have come to Ali radiallahu anhu and not the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that Jibreel alayhi salam made a mistake. And likewise, they declare all of the Sahaba to be disbelievers. They revile the wives, the noble wives of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and many other things were entered. And in reality, the origin, the roots of the Rafida go back to the Yahud, to the individuals from among the Yahud, from among the Jews. So this became a second major group to appear, the Shia. We refer to them as the Rafida. And this again is in relation to the Sahaba, the status of the Sahaba. The third group to appear were the Qadariyah, and these are the people who began to deny that Allah knows things before they occur, that Allah knows things before they take place. And this is the extreme group amongst them. So they deny that Allah has knowledge of things that take place before they occur. And likewise, they deny that Allah creates the actions of His servants. And the reason why they say this is, they say, how can Allah reward or punish anyone when He is the creator of their actions? Right? So they consider this to be injustice. So then what they said that men are the creators of their own actions, that whatever action you choose to do, it is outside of Allah's creative power. So really what this means is that there are creators besides Allah. Right? When we do our deeds, we are outside of the domain of Allah's creative power. Right? So we are willing, choosing, and doing outside of Allah's control, outside of Allah's power. What they are really saying is that Allah created us, and then He just left us to do whatever we're going to do. And the extreme ones say that He doesn't know of our deeds until after we've done them, and He does not actually create our deeds at all. And only then is it just for Allah to reward or to punish us. This is their misconception. The misconception is they are saying that if Allah already knows our deeds, what we're going to do, and if He is the one who's creating all of our deeds, then how can He reward and how can He punish? Right? So this is not justice. So in order to say that Allah is being just, they claim that we have complete freedom to choose and do what we want outside of Allah's will, outside of Allah's power. So what this really means is that things take place in Allah's creation without His will and without His creative power. So Iblis is acting outside of Allah's will and power. And we are acting, choosing and doing and acting outside of Allah's will and power. So this now means that there are creators in Allah's creation other than Him. And this is why the Messenger of Allah, when he spoke about them, he actually mentioned them by name. He said the Qadariyah, that they will appear. And he said about them that they are the Majus, the Magians of this Ummah. What did he mean by this? The Magians or the Majus, this Magian is a religion from Persia, what the present day Iran. And these people used to believe that there is a God of good and there is a God of evil. Right? So the God of good, which they equate with light, is what brings about all things which are good. And the God of evil is the one that does all of the evil things, which is the God of evil. So the Messenger of Allah, he likened this group to those Magians or to those fire worshippers who used to worship the fire because he thought it was a source of goodness. So in any case, these people appeared during the time of Ibn Umar radiyallahu anhuma, and the more extreme ones, they don't exist anymore. The ones who say that Allah does not have prior knowledge of events. But the others, the mainstream Qadariyah, then they exist today. The Shia, they are Qadariyah today. All of the Shia, they are upon Qadar, this bid'ah of Qadar. So this is now a third sect which appeared in the Muslim nation. And the thing to keep in mind is that these ideas, they came into the Muslim nation, they never disappeared. There will always be found people or whole groups of people who are upon these innovations, right? So it's clear, like Al-Qaeda, ISIS, these groups are upon the way of the Khawarij, the Rafida, the whole of Iran, the Iranians are upon this Shiism and Rafd, Al-Qadar, then the Rafida Al-Qadariyah, the Zaydi Shiites in Yemen, they're upon this as well. So this is the third major innovation. The fourth major innovation is in relation to Iman, faith. What is belief? What is Iman? And is Iman something that's just only in the heart, or is it something that involves a person's deeds as well? The reason, or one of the reasons why this innovation appeared, is because it was kind of like a counter-reaction to the Khawarij. Because the Khawarij, they would say that when a Muslim falls into a sin, for example, he drinks, he gambles, or he steals, this person now has completely left Islam. Right? So obviously this is false. We say that this is a sinful Muslim. His faith is deficient. But these extremists, the Khawarij, they would say that this Muslim has left Islam altogether. He's left Islam altogether. So as a counter-reaction to this, some other people, they began to say that, how can a Muslim leave Islam by way of his deeds? This can't be correct. This must mean that faith is only in the heart. It's only what's in a heart. Because a believer cannot leave Islam by way of deeds. Right? So therefore this means that faith can only be in the heart, and that outward deeds cannot be from faith. But again, they made a mistake as well. This is what happens when you refute one innovation with another innovation. This is wrong as well. Rather, what is correct is that when we speak of faith, what is faith? Faith is something that exists in your heart, such as your belief in the oneness of Allah and your belief in the books and the messengers and the angels. These are things that you believe. Then faith is also the actions of your heart. Right? So for example, when you feel love for Allah and His Messenger, when you have fear of Allah, when you have hope in Allah, and when you have reliance in your heart upon Allah, these are all actions of the heart. This is from faith as well. This is from Iman. And likewise, when you express the belief, or you say the shahada outwardly with the tongue, this is now iman which is on your tongue, because iman is also statements. And likewise, all of your deeds that you do outwardly of the prayer, the fasting, giving charity, making dhikr, making istighfar, making tawbah, all of this is from faith as well. So all of this together, all these things together, all of them are from iman. And a believer's iman, it can increase and it can also decrease, depending upon his deeds and the state and condition of his heart. And this is what we believe. Iman increases, iman decreases. Iman consists of many things, some of which are in the heart, some of which are upon the tongue, some of which are upon the limbs, and all of that is the entire religion. However, when you say that iman is just belief only, then there are many, many false consequences that follow on from this. So if you say, for example, iman is just to have knowledge of Allah, that means Iblis is a believer, Fir'aun is a believer. If you say iman is just to believe in Allah's oneness and to know that the messenger is true, this would mean that many of the Jews and Christians are believers as well, because inwardly they knew and they believed, they knew inwardly that the messenger Muhammad is in fact a messenger of Allah and the Quran is from Allah. They knew inside, internally, in terms of tasdeeq and so on and so forth. But they didn't express belief outwardly for reasons, either because of arrogance or because they didn't want to leave the religion of their forefathers. Right? So this means that just belief alone cannot be all of iman. Right? Iman is belief in the heart and expression with the tongue and acting by the limbs. So the point being, this innovation appeared at the very end of the 1st century and the beginnings of the 2nd century. Right? And these are the 4 major innovations which appeared, and all of these innovations are present today. Right? So those people who are upon this false belief regarding iman are the Ash'aris and the Maturidis. Right? Ash'aris say that iman is just belief in the heart. Tasdeeq. It's just belief in the heart. And the Maturidis say that it is belief in the heart and also statement with the tongue, but actions are not from faith, are not from iman. So these 4 major innovations which appeared in the 1st century of Islam, these are the usul, these are the foundations of the sects. There are some of the Salaf like Abdullah bin al-Mubarak radiyallahu anhu, rahimahullah ta'ala, who said that the foundations of the sects are four. And he mentioned these 4: the Khawarij, the Rafida, the Qadariyah, and the Murji'ah. And there are some other statements as well, and they mentioned the Jahmiyyah with them as well. So here now you can see that these innovations which appeared, they led to the splitting of the Muslim nation. And these innovations are not new innovations unique to Islam, because these innovations also appeared amongst the Jews and amongst the Christians. Before Islam came, they were among the Jews who were upon the way of the Khawarij. They would revolt against their rulers or their prophets. And amongst the Christians were those who were upon the bid'ah of Qadr, who used to deny Qadr. And, so these innovations are not something unique to Islam. Rather, they are to be found in previous religions or in relation to previous revealed books as well. Then we move to the 2nd century after Islam, and in this century there are numerous other movements or ideas which appear as well, and we're going to mention them briefly as well, inshallah. So the first of those ideas to appear is what we call ilmul kalam, and this is to speak about Allah, His names, His attributes and His actions using intellect and philosophy, using reason and philosophy. So there were many groups which appeared. The first of those groups were known as the Jahmiyyah. They were named after a man called Jahm bin Safwan and his teacher Al-Ja'd bin Dirham. And these two men, what they used to do is they are similar to what we see today. Many people who are involved in debating with the Jews, debating with the Christians, debating with the atheists, debating with the scientists, debating with the philosophers. And what they use as the tools of debate, they use philosophy as a foundation. And this is what these two men, Jahm bin Safwan, Al-Ja'd bin Dirham, this is what they were doing at the beginning of the 2nd century of Islam. And this is because when Islam spread, Islam spread out of the Jazeera, out of the peninsula, Arabian Peninsula, and then it conquered Sham and Iraq and over Khorasan and those places. In these places there were Jews, there were Christians, there were Sabi'a, star worshippers, and all of these nations as well, they had also been affected by the philosophy of the Greeks. And what they began to do is that they took the philosophy of the Greeks, like Aristotle, Plato, and they began to, and because these philosophers, they used to speak about the creator or the prime mover or the first cause, and they used to use a certain type of language, philosophical language, that this creator is not a body, he's not in place, he's not in time, he's not in a location, he can't be confined, he can't this, and they're using all of this negative language. Not in a place, not in a location, not a body, he's not made of parts, he's not this. Right? This type of speech about Allah, as you can see, this is not based in revelation. This is not taken from the prophets and messengers. This is taken upon men trying to use their intellects and trying to figure out what is perfection for Allah. Right? And then they came out with these words, with these phrases, with these ideas. Allah is not a jism, Allah is not a body, Allah is not in a place, Allah is not in a location, Allah does not have temporary attributes, right? He does not undergo events, He does not change, He does not... All of this is not the language of the prophets and messengers. So they developed philosophical language with which to describe what they believed to be perfection. Right? This poison had already affected the Jews and already affected the Christians before Islam came. Then when Islam came, the way that this entered into the Muslim nation was through the likes of these ignorant people, Al-Ja'd bin Dirham, Al-Jahm bin Safwan. They would go to, travel around Khorasan, Damascus, Harran. These were all centers of, for example, Christianity in Damascus, or Harran, which is the place where the Sabi'a, the philosophers who were affected by Greek philosophy, this is where Ibn Taymiyyah was born many centuries later. Right? They used to go there and debate and argue. And through debating with these Christians and these Jews and these philosophers, they acquired the same poison. And then they brought it into Islam. And then they began to speak with this language during the time of the Tabi'een, during the time of the likes of Imam al-Zuhri, rahimahullah, Ayub al-Sakhtiyani, rahimahullah, Ibn Sirin, rahimahullah, Ibn Wahab, and so on and so forth. And they began to start speaking with this language. Allah is not in a place, Allah is not in a location, Allah cannot be confined, Allah cannot be above the throne, because this means putting Him in a place, and putting Him in a place means confining Him, and confining Him means that He's like one of His creatures. All of this is philosophical poison that came from outside of Islam. Yeah, so this poison, these individuals began to speak, and then a movement appeared in the time of the Tabi'een who began to speak with this language. And they believed that this is the truth regarding speech about Allah Azza wa Jal. And then when they saw in the Quran that the Quran speaks about Allah, saying that Allah is above His throne, and that Allah will be seen in the hereafter. That Allah Azza wa Jal will, that He ascends above His throne. Right? They began to look at these texts and say, this is disbelief. How can Allah be in a place? How can Allah be in a location? How can Allah rise above something, above His throne? Right? This is only what created things do. So anyway, they then began to give new interpretations to the verses of the Quran, right? And began to bring figurative, metaphorical explanations of the Quran because of these reasons, because of this poison which entered into Islam. So this is the first major innovation to appear at the beginning of the 2nd century, the bid'ah. This is the bid'ah of ilmul kalam. This is called ilmul kalam, which is really speculative speech, speaking out of speculation. Why? Because you're not speaking from the Quran and the Sunnah as a foundation. You are using your reason, intellect, and philosophy. So really, you are just speculating. It's speculation. You don't really know that your speech, is it true or not, right? So this ilmul kalam, this led to, over the next 2 or 3 centuries, there were many subgroups. There were many offshoots of this group. Jahmiyyah are the first ones, the Jahmiyyah. Then the Mu'tazila, then the Kullabiyya in the 3rd century, Kullabiyya. Then the Karramiyya in the 3rd century as well. Then you have the Ash'aris in the 4th century, Maturidis after them. All of these groups are known as the groups of Ilmul Kalam, right? They built their creed, their aqidah, upon these foundations, and they have many mistakes, in that respect. These groups are present today. There are Jahmiyyah present today, there are Mu'tazila present today in the form of the Rafida. The Ash'aris and Maturidis are one of the largest sects present today in the Muslim Ummah. They're all across North Africa, in the Far East, in Malaysia, Indonesia, Shafi'is, Ash'aris. They are all across, all those who are Hanafis, like in towards Khorasan, towards past Afghanistan and all those Turkic countries and all that region, all Hanafis, all Maturidis, right? Most of the Asians, Hanafis, Pakistan, India, those areas, all Hanafis, right? They're all upon the belief of the Maturidis, right? All of this is present today. So the point being that we need to understand, like when we speak about this principle, we need to understand what are the causes of differing. What's actually causing the differing, right? It's the presence of these innovations, and that differing will not stop until you free yourself from these innovations. The next innovation is the innovation of tasawwuf. Tasawwuf is like Sufism, and when this began to happen at the early stages in the time of the Tabi'een, tasawwuf was basically just an exaggeration in piety. An exaggeration in piety. Tasawwuf. 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 And this is the similar word that when we say Sufism, it's derived from the same root. Sufism, tasawwuf. And this initially began as just an exaggeration in piety, keeping away from the world, renouncing the world, locking oneself away in one's home, worshipping all night, right? Keeping away from the people, living in poverty, keeping away from the worldly things. And then this is not something that Islam commands. It's not something that Islam requires from you, right? To be a recluse, to escape from life, to just be involved in worship, right? So Islam, this is not the true zuhud. However, some people initially they began to exaggerate in the affairs of worship, and then this exaggeration grew and grew and grew and then many other things came into it until it became an actual innovation in the religion, right? They innovated new forms of worship. They innovated new ideas into Islam. And obviously this is much more complicated than what I'm explaining, but simply for the sake of brevity, this tasawwuf is related to spirituality. How do you purify your soul? How do you become closer to Allah? How do you remove from your soul all of those negative qualities like greed, right? Vengeance, lust, and things like that. But what they did was they tried to do these things using innovated ways, innovated forms of worship. They didn't stick to the Quran and the Sunnah. The Quran and the Sunnah came to purify the souls of the people, as Allah says about the Messenger of Allah, وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ, that the Messenger comes وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, to purify them and to teach them the book and the wisdom. The Quran and the Sunnah, whatever it has brought of things like the prayer, fasting, charity, istighfar, tawbah, dhikr, and everything that's legislated, this is sufficient for us to purify our souls. But these people wrongly believed, that to be spiritual and to purify one's soul, they innovated many things. And also they took ideas from the Buddhists. One of the centers of Buddhism was a place towards Afghanistan called Balkh. This is in that region, right, towards the east, Balkh. And many of the Sufis came from Balkh. Many of the Sufis. And Balkh was a center of Buddhism. Buddhism, as you know, they have like meditation, they have like spiritual things that they do. And many of these ideas came into the Sufis. Right? So now this particular innovation, what has this particular innovation brought into Islam? It's brought an innovated form of spirituality, of cleansing the soul, of purifying the soul. So instead of adhering to the Quran and the Sunnah, instead they brought all of these philosophical ideas about spirituality, innovated practices as well, innovated forms of worship, innovated dhikr, exaggeration in worship, and they oppose the Quran and the Sunnah. And this continues to this day of ours. As you know, Sufism, it then grew and developed, and more ideas entered into it, until some very evil ideas, entered into it, ideas which entail disbelief and kufr. So this is now tasawwuf. So if you stop and pause and think for a moment, and you try to figure out what's wrong in this Muslim nation, your answer is here. You have ideas of the Khawarij. You have the Rafidah and their poison towards the Sahaba. You have rejection of Allah's Qadr, Al-Qada wal-Qadr. You have misunderstanding about Iman. What is Iman? You have Ilmul Kalam, people speaking about Allah, His names, His attributes, upon speculation. So they reject His names or reject His attributes. They interpret and distort the Book of Allah. Then you have Tasawwuf, Sufism, people worshipping Allah upon innovation. They're not worshipping Him the way that He legislated that you worship Him. So they are opposing a mighty foundation of the religion, that you worship Allah only through what He legislated. And then, so this is the sixth idea or sixth deviation. Seventh deviation, we'll cover one or two more, we'll finish there inshallah. Seventh deviation to enter is falsafa, a philosophy. And even though it overlaps with Ilmul Kalam, we treat it separately, because during the end of the 2nd century and early 3rd century, many of the books of Greek philosophy were translated into Arabic. Many of the books of Greek philosophy were translated into the Arabic language. So much of the poison that was in that Greek philosophy, then it was entered into the Islamic sciences. the Islamic sciences. So for example, well, obviously this didn't happen just in the 2nd century, but the end of the 2nd century, but it was the starting point of a process that eventually led to many of the Islamic sciences being corrupted. For example, Al-Ghazali, who is an Ash'ari scholar, he tried to merge logic, or he brought logic into fiqh. Right? He brought logic, Greek logic, into fiqh. And he gave the idea that you cannot be a faqih or a mujtahid, you cannot derive rulings from the Quran and the Sunnah unless you are a master of logic. Now, this is false. The Sahaba never studied logic. The Sahaba never studied the logic of the nations or the philosophy of the nations. Rather, they took from the Quran and the Sunnah the correct understanding, and they didn't need logical principles, the principle of logic, to understand that. But the point that we are making is, as a result of this heritage of philosophy being translated, logic, philosophy, and things like that, then this was the starting point of the Islamic sciences becoming corrupted. Whether that is tafsir, whether that is fiqh, as we see here, and other areas like creed, obviously, as well, the issues of creed. So this now brought in, or was the cause of many other forms of corruption as well. So this is falsafa, philosophy, and the Mu'tazila played a big role in this. They were affected heavily by Greek philosophy. That's number 7. Number 8, which is more like a movement which appeared, is a movement known as the Batiniya. This group has its origin in the Shiites, and what they claim, or what they say, is that the Quran has an apparent meaning and it also has a hidden meaning. And this is actually what the Shia say. The Shia say that the true explanation of the Quran was with Ali radiallahu anhu, was with Ali. And Ali taught it to Ahlul Bayt, to his offspring, to the Ahlul Bayt. And this is where the true knowledge of the Quran lies. So then they began to exaggerate. At the beginning they said, for every verse there is an apparent meaning, which is what we understand, but then there's a hidden meaning as well. And then they exaggerated and they said, actually no, for every verse there are 7 hidden meanings. Then they turned it into 70. Then they said 700. Then they exaggerated, and they said that every ayah in the Quran has so many hidden meanings, and that these hidden meanings have been transmitted through Ali radiallahu anhu, and they are known to the Shia. This basic idea began with the Shiites, but then it developed into an idea that later was known, or a movement which is known as the Batiniya. This word batin, it means what is inward, what is hidden. So Batiniya meaning those people who claim that there are hidden forms of knowledge, secret forms of knowledge. They brought this poison into Islam. Like how you have, for example, among the Jews, they say that in the Torah there is a hidden code. There's a numerical code in the Torah, and it holds all of the secrets to the creation and this and that and the other. And likewise, you see among the Christians are those who say that in the Bible there is a secret code and the secret meanings, and this is the same thing. People brought this into Islam and began to speak about the Quran and the Sunnah in the same way. But Islam is open. Islam is apparent. There are no hidden secrets in Islam. There are no secret orders in Islam. Islam is apparent. Islam is open. Islam teaches the truth, right? And whatever the messenger taught us is the truth. There's nothing left. There's nothing hidden. There are no people who have special knowledge and have secret knowledge. All of this idea is completely false. But this movement, the Batiniya, they brought this idea into Islam, and obviously this idea continues today. You'll see many people, many ignorant people, speaking with this type of language, claiming that there are secret, understandings and this and whatever, and so on and so forth. This was the 8th. We can actually mention another one, 9th kind of general movement, which is the use of ra'i. Ra'i is opinion. Opinion. To use opinion when speaking about the religion, and specifically when speaking about Islamic rulings. Islamic rulings. Ahlul Ra'i. There was a group of jurists, scholars, who became known as Ahlul Ra'i, the people of opinion. And what eventually happened with this is that people began to give their opinion a greater value than the hadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then eventually this became very rigid until people began to place the rulings derived by their school of thought to be superior to the ahadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? So this rigidity in viewpoints, in fiqh, in mu'amalat, in the ahkam and so on and so forth, this is what we call the people of Ra'i. And this also led to opposing the Quran and the Sunnah, opposing the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this you find, for example, among the Hanafis, and not just the Hanafis, but generally you find others have the same thing. This rigidity that you insist on sticking to the opinion of your school of thought, even when it clashes clearly with a clear hadith. I mentioned to you, I think in the previous lesson, how the Shafi'is believe that if a man just merely touches a woman, just physical contact, then that person has invalidated his wudu. And they say this on the basis of an ayah in the Quran, أَوْ لَامَسْتُمُ النِّسَاءِ, where Allah is using a term, لَامَسَ, which has the root meaning is to touch, but here it's being used with the meaning of to have relations. Right? And they have this view in their school of thought, and they are not willing to let go of it, despite the fact that there are many narrations about the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, having contact with his wives without, obviously not actual relations, but contact and things like that, and without repeating his wudu. But they will insist on sticking to that, sticking to their opinion, and they will not go back to the evidence. Right? This is found strongly amongst the Hanafis, but it's also found in some of the other schools as well. This whole thing about sticking to your opinion despite the evidence is another kind of deviation that led people to oppose the Quran and oppose the Sunnah. So, we've taken most of our lesson going through this. This is important to cover all of this, because once you understand all of this, then you will truly appreciate the rest of the discussion about this principle. So, if you like, this was just like setting the foundations, so we have a good understanding what's happened to this Muslim nation, all of these individual orientations which appeared, how they split the Muslim nation, how these remain today, and they never disappeared, and how people are not willing to let go of what is incorrect. And at the same time, these are the very same people who are saying we're calling to unity. Right? When really they're just perpetuating the actual differences by refusing to abandon whatever innovation they're upon and following the way of the Salaf. Right? So all of this will help us appreciate some of the points that Sheikh Zaid and Sheikh Muhammad Aman will make in what is to follow, inshallah ta'ala. So we'll end the lesson there for today. Inshallah, we'll continue this topic in the next lesson.